It's 2 o'clock, Your Worship.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I call this Committee of the Whole Thursday, January 26, 2023, 2 p.m. to order, and to acknowledge that we are on the territory of the Chehalis. Can you hear me okay back there? Yes, that's good. Thank you. Thank you. Next order of business, please.
Are there any late items, Your Worship?
There are. I want to start with I've heard from some members of the public and with some concerns, and I just want to bring publicly personal information regarding myself. I just want to bring a story up. Just weeks before the election, I had a family reunion, and it was a large family reunion, and it was in Osoyoos. The first day was a great party, good event. Woke up the next morning thinking I had a hangover. In fact, it really wasn't a hangover. I have a daughter who is a health nut. She says, "Dad, you should go get some help, get someone to look at you." Here I am in a campground in Osoyoos. I thought, oh, it can wait, just a hangover. Then I thought, Jesus, this is Friday. I better go see a doctor just in case. So my son-in-law threw me in the back of his car, drove me to Oliver. Got to Oliver, went into the emergency. The hospital did all their magic, their tests. They concluded everything was good, and they were just in the process of basically releasing me to walk out the door. Well, at that time, I had a massive heart attack right there to the floor. If I wasn't in that hospital, I wouldn't be here today. From there, they trucked me into Kelowna. I spent an opportunity to spend hours in the back of an ambulance contemplating what life is really about. When I got to the Kelowna hospital, there must have been at least 20 caregivers, doctors, absolutely every medical profession you can think of that were at my side. They all worked together as an awesome team. They all pulled together. Within hours, I was in an operating room and out. 3 days later, I returned home. My doctors have said if I wasn't standing in that emergency ward, I definitely would not have been here today. I'm a 62-year-old man in absolutely excellent physical condition, have no history of heart illness. It was just one of those freak things. Someone wanted me to be here today. So when we got back, I had a good conversation with my wife. So do I still want to run in the election? And I said, absolutely. I have a passion for this village, and I want to see this village. I want to see change. So that's why I am here. That's what motivated me to run for mayor. Next item, when I woke up this morning, there was a letter. And this letter here is addressed to mayor and council. And I would like to actually read it. I think there's some very valid, well-written, some good comments in it, and its values which I support. Again, it says, to mayor and council, Village of Harrison Hot Springs by hand, January 25th, 2023. Dear council, last November 7th, you took the oath of office and were thereafter required and expected to abide by it. The oath said in part, quote, I will carry out my duties with integrity. I will perform my duties of my office in accordance with the law. In the hierarchy of such applicable laws, the provincial statutes, the community charter, and the local government act, they rank above municipal bylaws. Here's what the statute says about calling of, quote, special council meetings, i.e. those held in addition to the regularly scheduled twice monthly council meetings. Calling of special council meetings. I'm not going to read the charter out for you. I'm going to skip that section, continue on. On January 11th, you all took part in an illegal council meeting which was convened in direct violation of the above statute. It was not called by the mayor. It was not called by two council members. It was not signed by the corporate officer. There could not have been any of the required signatures because no notice was given to the public as clearly required. Mayor Wood and myself and others who pay attention to village business can attest to this. I must note that the corporate officer has admitted publicly that none of the required notices for special meetings have been properly signed by anyone for at least 5 years. By attending and participating in this illegal meeting, you have not only violated the provincial statute, you have also breached your oath of office by failing to perform the duties of your office in accordance with the law. The law is clear. This is a breach. Mayor Wood attempted to stop this illegal meeting from happening. While he did not quote the community charter at the start of the meeting, he did quote the village's procedural bylaw, which is equally clear. You ignored and held it anyhow by refusing to recognize the law and continuing the meeting in defiance of it. You are all complicit in illegal actions. Your future compound, I cut out the next paragraph, I edited that. So you're further compounded your transgressions by deceptively altering the January 11th Zoom video before posting it, removing the first part of the January 11th meeting. Then you adopted the meetings of the council meeting as if it had been properly convened meeting of council, which it was not. To remind you of the events of January 11th, here is a verbatim transcript of the first part of that meeting, of which I won't read. I read this because it really reminds me of the first day when we were sworn into office. And we did say that we would follow the oath, that we would perform our duties in accordance with the law. I think that the law is an important part of the democratic system. I believe, again, in open, transparent government. I believe in good, accountable council, mayor. I stand strong behind that oath. That being said, previous to our last regular council meeting last Monday, there was a closed in-camera meeting that was held at 6 o'clock. And that meeting was deemed illegal by the mayor at that time. And Councillor Buckley and myself did not attend that meeting. The other councillors carried on with the council meeting in violation, knowing it was not a valid meeting. Councillor Buckley and myself as mayor have absolutely no idea what was said, decisions made, what was done at that meeting. That's wrong. Fast forward to here we are today. I, as mayor, am responsible for calling this committee of the whole meeting. This committee of the whole meeting was called over 2 days. And the main purpose of being called over 2 days was because two councillors, more specifically Councillor Buckley, wanted to spend some time and go over the OCP, wanted to go over it in line detail. And Councillor Jackson had a number of questions. So we didn't know if it was going to be 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. So we wanted to make sure that the time is there. As I said at the beginning, I want to change. The OCP is our future, where we're going to head. It is one of the most important documents that we are doing that's going to set the future of this village. That's my drive. So when I get the agenda package, which is the same time as everybody else in the public, which was yesterday morning, I see that it's not on the agenda. I see that we have something called Planning 101. I don't know anything about Planning 101. Clearly, this meeting was to discuss the OCP. I would like to ask our planner if he could help me understand what happened.
Yes, Your Worship. I was told to do Planning 101 session for today.
You were told by village staff
Yes,
to come today and only do a 101 class.
yes. And then the next, in the February 15th, 16th was going to be the OCP discussion.
So I did receive after this agenda went out that there was a request to put on the calendar here for OCP. It's called an information sensor session, sorry. And it was to be held in February the 16th, 2023, 2 p.m. and to be held at the village office. Was the intent of this meeting to be a meeting where the public was to be invited? The one that's that you were referring to in February the 16th, 2023? Correct.
It's however the client wishes to set the meeting up. That's not my oh, thank you.
I just have to say, I'm disappointed to not see it on the agenda. Again, calling a committee of the whole meeting for 2 days, and the OCP should be on there. It's extremely disappointing to see it scheduled for some further date, as I think we're sitting here. I don't know if the councillors were anticipating any discussion today on the OCP. Councillor Buckley.
No, I was not. What I read on the agenda was pretty much, it was going to be Mr. Cossey reviewing what was in there. And for the time frame, usually from 2 till 4 or 4:30 or whatever, I felt that it was going to be a presentation.
Was it your understanding, Councillor Buckley, though, that the conversation of the OCP was supposed to be in these 2 days of the committee of the whole meeting?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson?
The resolution was to have the OCP come to this council no later than February the 16th, 2023. I wouldn't have had sufficient time to go over the OCP the way I wanted to in 2 or 3 days. I suspect that you have a different motivation for this. And hopefully we can get it done sometime in February to get it done right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So I'm going to ask the Deputy Corporate Officer. Can you help me understand why it's not on the agenda?
Yeah, of course, Your Worship. My understanding from the minutes of the previous meeting was to schedule a Planning 101 session and then follow up according to the motion that was passed of council to have a OCP discussion on February 16th. And that is what I communicated to the planner.
Thank you. So next order of business. No, sorry. Next order of business is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a mover for approval of the agenda? So moved. She moved by Councillor Buckley, seconded by Councillor Jackson. All in favor? Call the question. All in favor? Just 1 second. It's okay. Sorry. I'll call the question. All in favor? Yeah, passes unanimously. Next item of business.
Yes, Your Worship, we have the Planning 101 session to be delivered by the planning consultant.
Go ahead to our planner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can everybody hear me okay? Super. So we're going to be talking about planning orientation meeting today, talking about planning and development. So what we're going to look at is some background information briefly. We'll look at the mandatory powers and the discretionary powers of council. We'll look at some provincial legislation. We'll look at some of the planning tools, what their function is, and the authority to create one of those tools. So basically, municipal governments, you have two basic types of power. You have your mandatory power, which is the power to regulate, prohibit, or impose regulations, or discretionary powers, where you choose to approve something or not to approve it. So what is the difference? Well, mandatory power is, for example, the passage of a zoning bylaw, not an amendment, but the actual passing. So the discretionary power, you're issuing a permit, approving a rezoning application. Councils can examine a wide range of issues before you exercise your discretionary powers. And the reason they're called discretionary is because you don't have to issue a permit. You do not have to issue a zoning amendment, nor do you have to issue an OCP amendment. The issues generally fall into the two following categories when you're looking at your discretionary powers. The planning function, how does the proposed application fit with your current policies and community goals? Or number two, the public interest, will the development have an overall negative or positive impact for the community? So when we're looking at provincial legislation, there's a variety of places where we have that type of information. The first place is the Local Government Act. Under Part 13 is the Regional Growth Strategy section. Part 14 is the Planning and Land Use Management component, and Part 15 is the Heritage Conservation. The Regional Growth Strategy is a responsibility of the regional district, and that's legislated under the Part 13 of the Local Government Act. Under the Land Title Act, you have subdivisions, and the council as a whole has limited approval or limited involvement because that is delegated down to an approving officer function. That means AO means the approving officer. However, there are some circumstances where you will could be asked if the highway frontage issues are not addressed properly, that because that has not been delegated to your approving officer, that has to come back to this table to whether or not you want to allow somebody to have a 6-meter highway frontage as opposed to the required 20-meter highway frontage. And there's also the Agricultural Land Commission Act, which looks at ALR areas, and this is also identified in your zoning bylaw and the official community plan. So some of the planning tools that are available under the permit section, you have what is called TUP or temporary use permits, DVPs, which is referred to as development variance permits, and DPs. Each of these tools does a specific issue. Also under the planning tools, you have your official community plan bylaw. 9 times out of 10, the courts will look at this as a policy document only. The only time that they do not look at it as a policy document is with the issuance of a development permit. Then you also have your zoning bylaw, you have your development cost charges, you have your subdivision servicing bylaw, you have your sign bylaw, your business licensing bylaw, and your development procedures bylaw. And the development procedures bylaw is not your meeting procedures bylaw. What a development procedures bylaw does for you is, because you've got an official community plan and you have a zoning bylaw in place, how, if you want to, how would you go about to amend it, or how would you issue a development, a permit of some sort? And as well in there, there's also the strata conversion requirements. Some of the policies that we currently have are the community amenity contributions. And other ranges that we have in place is the building inspection services through the Fraser Valley Regional District and the Advisory Planning Commission, which was created under a bylaw in 1006 in 2012. So looking now at the permits, as I mentioned earlier, they were authorized under the Local Government Act. A temporary use permit is used for commercial or industrial purposes only. You can do 3 years with one extension for up to 3 years. So in essence, if you wanted to, it could end up being 6 years. Long time ago, when I was working for the Peace River Regional District, a temporary use permit was issued for a campsite south of Chetwynd. The last time I was up there 3 years ago, that temporary use permit is still in place for that structure, which is not a good thing to do. They should have incorporated it into their zoning bylaw and give more assurance to the owners of that facility. But we have to be really careful with the use of temporary use permits, because sometimes they can get away from you. Development variance permit, a DVP relaxes any zoning bylaw regulation except use or density and various subdivision requirements. A development permit means additional information is required, and in this case, under the current official community plan, we have form and character issues that are addressed, hazardous situations, environmental, revitalization, the commercial areas, and conservation. Land use permits are a specialized land use planning tool used to implement the village's OCP policies and objectives as it relates to the orderly development of the village. Types of land use permits the village has in place are, we have the development permit in place, we have the temporary use permit in place, and we have the development variance permit in place. These are created under the authority of the Local Government Act, specifically sections 481 to 491 for the development permit, 492 to 497 for the temporary use permit, and 498 to 499 for the development variance permit. So a development permit is a type of tool that is looking to do any of the following issues for you. In this case, protection from natural hazards, address and establish its form and character, and helps to promote an OCP goal, such as energy conservation as an example. These are the 10 issues that taken right out of the official or the Local Government Act that you can do with your development permits. If you need to do a tool to establish the objectives to promote energy conservation, water conservation, greenhouse gas issues, you can create development permits to address those specific tools. Essentially, a development permit is looking for additional information before development can take place. Please note that it's not called a non-development permit. It's referred to as a development permit because additional information is required before you can have that comfort level as a council and issue that permit as required, or not issued if you so wish. And in this case, we've defined development as a subdivision, an alteration of land, or no construction on the land. So essentially, it's just if somebody puts a shovel into the ground, that's referred to as development. Not when you're doing your little garden shovel, but when you're doing a greenhouse in the backyard, or if you're doing an addition to your house, or if you're doing the house itself. Out of the 10 items allowed in the Local Government Act, the village currently uses 3. That's the Lakeshore Development Permit Area, which addresses form and character issues, the Commercial Development Permit Area, which also looks at form and character issues, hazardous multifamily, which also looks at form and character issues. The hazardous lands issue is addressed through the geotech, and the Miami River one is the environmental and the riparian area protection regulations requirements. Added in the new official community plan is a wildfire interface area and the greenhouse gas production requirements. The requirements are all laid out in the current OCP. And that is what the developer is required to do. And you shouldn't use words like should or may or shall, because shall can be reviewed as a, well, maybe I'm not really too interested in it, but I shall look at it, maybe. And then that's a Supreme Court ruling that it's not a definitive word like must. You must do this, you must do that. For example, in the Capital Regional District, when I was doing work for them a number of years ago, there was quite an extensive development permit requirement. And in it, it said at the very end of it, the developer should consider this. It was about 15 pages of really good stuff, but because they put that word in there, should consider this, the job became, Mr. Developer, did you consider this? The answer was yes, development permit has to be issued. This is why it's very, very tricky when you're dealing with development permits, that you have the right language in there and everybody knows exactly what's going on. Temporary use permits can be used to allow temporary commercial or industrial land uses to take place, even though the zoning land use bylaw regulations does not allow them. In the current official or the current zoning bylaw, we only allow temporary use permits for commercial activities only, no industrial. OCP or zoning bylaw, the OCP designates areas and outlines the conditions, The requirements of the village are contained within section 5.2 of the zoning bylaw for your temporary use permit. They can be issued for a term not to exceed 3 years and may be renewed for an additional term not to exceed 3 more years. Security may be required to ensure that the conditions and terms of the permit have been addressed. And at the end of the 3 years, if you so require, they can also make sure that it goes back to the way it was before they started. And in this stuff, whenever you're taking security, you never, ever take a bond. Because a bond is still considered an asset of that corporation. And if that corporation goes bankrupt, you lost that bond. So whenever you're taking security, it's always an irrevocable letter of credit. Because that irrevocable letter of credit is outside of their system, outside of their asset of that corporation. And the reason I'm saying this, because there was about 10 years ago, I hate to age myself, maybe 15 years ago, there was I can't remember if it was in Kamloops or Kelowna, but the courts ruled that the bond that the developer issued was an asset of the bankrupt corporation, and the receiver of whoever was the receiver got that money, not the community. And one of the classic examples that I always point to is, remember for the longest time when you're driving through Machosen, there was these big holes in the ground? That's another example of what happened right there. Because they took a bond and not irrevocable letter of credit. Development variance permits, they can vary any of your following regulations. You can vary any of your following bylaw requirements: your zoning bylaw, your subdivision servicing bylaw, your farm business, if there is a bylaw in place for that, your manufactured home and campground bylaw, that's the one that was created in 1988, I believe it was. Your runoff requirements, off-street parking requirements, loading, signs, screening, and landscaping. What you cannot vary is the use or density as specified. And as well, you cannot vary what is referred to as the new residential tenure zoning. That's a new requirement under the Local Government Act, where you can have just specifically rental zones if you so desire. Or any floodplain regulations or requirements. So how do you make a decision when you're looking at issuing a development permit? Well, one of the things that you look at is, can the additional information provided be deemed as adequate? In other words, do you have enough information to make an informed decision, and have the guidelines been met? And that is part of the staff report back to council. And planning and servicing, how does the proposed application fit with our current policies, and what are the works and servicing impacts to the community? Again, this is part of a staff report to council after looking at all the related policies and bylaws. And then the public interest. Will the development have an overall negative or positive impact on the community? When you're looking at a development variance permit, one of the things you might want to look at, for example, is health and safety perspective. Can you safely get a fire truck around there? Is it still going to be a good fire break? That sort of information. Temporary use permit. What are the impacts to the neighborhood? These are just some of the things. This is not specific to any situation. For example, what could be some of the impacts? Well, under your temporary use permit, that could be noise, traffic, conflicting land uses, lighting, parking, health and safety of the area, height of the use compared to the adjacent heights. Think of this as a temporary rezoning application, and what are the potential impacts if the application is approved? And that, again, also the report is done and put in front of you. A development variance permit, health and safety of the individuals who reside on the neighboring properties or any shade areas. What are the impacts if a land use regulation has been changed? And again, that'll be a professional opinion that will sit in front of council for their, as part of their, your decision-making process. Development permit, you have enough information to make an informed decision. And does the information provided give you a comfort level? That's something I can't tell you. I can just say that the information has been provided. Here's what it does, but does it give council as a whole a comfort level? Well, that's the whole process of the decision-making factor. But 9 times out of 10, you have to remember when a development permit is put in front of you and staff says that all of the development permit considerations have been addressed, it's prudent to seriously consider issuing it, because this is where most of the court cases that happen are because a municipality has refused to issue a development permit. So as I mentioned earlier as well, we have what is referred to as a development procedures bylaw. And in this case, it's bylaw 1090 that created in 2016. And what this does is when we have applications come in, how are they processed? How are permits issued? And what type of information is needed as part of the development application? And this is created under Section 460 of the Local Government Act. And whenever we're looking at everything that comes in front of you, when you're dealing with land use issues, there's 2 things that you should always remember. That's the term natural justice and fair play. Has everybody been treated fairly? And has everybody had a chance to say yes or no to this? The official community plan. An official community plan is a statement of objectives and policies to guide decisions on planning and land use management within the area covered by the plan, respecting the land use desires of Harrison Hot Springs. The required content of an OCP is found in Section 473 of the Local Government Act, and currently you have Bylaw 864 in place, and that was created in 2007. So what is a zoning bylaw? It's different from an official community plan, and it's actually the bylaw that implements the official community plan. That's the bylaw. This zoning bylaw is actually more important than the official community plan, because this is the implementation tool of the official community plan. A land use planning tool that is used to implement the village's OCP policies and objectives as it relates to the orderly development of the village through the assignment of land use regulations. For example, in the official community plan, we can have low density residential areas designated for that type of activity. The zoning bylaw will say this is R1 area inside of that low density residential development or designation area. This area is R2. R1 allows this type of activity, R2 allows this type of activity. But they're still covering the low density residential designation of the official community plan. Speaking in very general terms, the various land use categories. Oh, I'm not allowed to walk around. Speaking in very general terms, the various land use categories associated with a zoning bylaw, you have your residential, you have commercial, community, or any combination thereof. Some communities like to get into what is called comprehensive development zones, or they like to do site specific, or what is referred to as a spot zone. There's a whole host of things that can happen with how you want to set it all up. The issue is, don't focus in on the name. You can call the zone whatever you want, and you can call it the Ken Costi zone if you want. The issue that you have with the zoning bylaw is what is permitted, what are the rules and regulations associated with it, what are the accessory uses. Don't worry about the name so much. Look at the permitted uses and how that comes about. And as I mentioned earlier, we have under bylaw 1115, 2017 is the updated zoning bylaw for the village. It's created under the authority of the Local Government Act, specifically Section 479 of the Local Government Act. And as the province allows for the creation of a zoning bylaw, it is a legal document that outlines various land use regulations. You can see already that it's different from an official community plan because it's OCPs or policies. These zoning bylaws are the regulations. So what are some of the planning tools? What does a zoning bylaw actually do? Well, it creates land use zones that outlines any or all of the permitted and accessory uses, the minimum lot sizes, setbacks from various lot lines, site coverage, your building height, your FAR or your floor to area ratio. A lot of people figure that when you utilize the FAR, that is talking about density, But that's not necessarily the case. It's on a case-by-case situation when you're looking at it. Because you can use the FAR because you may have an environmental issue on the parcel of land. So instead of having 100% of it lot coverage, you can only allow 50% of it to be covered. So you're allowing these guys to build up to compensate for that. And that's addressed through the FAR. The other issue you're looking at is your fence heights, regulation of home occupation, your accessory use requirements, your temporary building regulations, your off-street parking requirements, and your off-street loading requirements. And then one of the things that we always have to be aware of is trends and issues change. And the reason I've got cannabis up here is because in, what was it, 2 years ago? The federal government legalized marijuana. So now that became an issue in the zoning bylaw because we had to put it in to say none. No shops allowed, which was your prerogative. So some of the other things we have to look at is your development costs charges. And basically, and this is allowed through the Local Government Act, and this is a development cost recovery program where you pay for future servicing as a result of a development application. Currently, you have bylaw 960/2011 in place. And then your subdivision, you have your Land Title Act and the Local Government Act. And you have your subdivision servicing bylaw in place, bylaw 1179/2022. One of the things we have to remember when we're dealing with this is because we're dealing with development and land processes, all of these bylaws have to have the same definitions. Because if you say over here, this is what we mean by the site, in your zoning bylaw, it means X, Y, and Z. In your subdivision servicing bylaw, it's, you got A, B, C, D. Which way does the judge go? So this is why it's important to ensure that you have one set of definitions that permeates all of your bylaws. And then you have what is referred to as community amenity contributions. This is an interesting planning tool. It's starting to pick up a lot of traction, but it does not exist legally. However, having said all of that stuff, the provincial government through their Ministry of Municipal Affairs, they have a guideline to tell you how to set it all up. So you're in that kind of gray area. But what is a community amenity contribution? It's basically what you can do is when a development comes in, you can hint or kind of get at saying, would you like to contribute whatever X number of dollars towards the operations of the fire hall? Because your development application is going to impact the fire hall by another 10 or 15, 20, whatever %. So this is what the community amenity contributions requires. So one of the things that they're looking at from the ministry level is you have it designated in your official community plan. So you have that transparency out there. It's not in your current official community plan. And at the same time is you have a community amenity contributions reserve set up, and that's part of your budgeting process every year. So the more transparent you can be with the community amenity contributions, the easier it is for staff to go up and say to the developers, we need you to do X, Y, and Z from a community contributions program. The way it's set up right now, we have to go cap in hand and say, are you interested? They say, no, we're done. Because we can't penalize them or hold up their application. So this is a good program. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But as I said, it's not regulated under any act or regulation at this particular point in time. But as I said, the province has muddied the waters by putting out that guideline. And that guideline's been out since 2014. And then we have a new planning tool, which is called Development Approval Information. That's a long and cumbersome term, and it's basically just means impact analysis. So there's 5 things you can look at. You can get the developer to pay for the impact analysis. How's it going to impact the environment? How's it going to impact our sewer and water, or our roads? How's it going to impact our infrastructure? You can look at it from that perspective. How's it going to impact our fire department? How's it going to impact the RCMP? How's it going to impact the schooling system? The way it has to operate under the legislation is you have to designate a DAI area inside of your official community plan. And then after that has been accepted, then you can come up with your development approval information bylaw saying that, Mr. whomever, we want you to do this study, we want you to do it, and here's the terms of reference, we take sections whatever out of, in the transportation portion of that bylaw, we take it all out and say, we want you to do X, Y, and Z, or whatever you want. They pay for it. Council reviews it with staff, and then we say, yeah, it's good. And part of it is if there's any mitigation, they have to identify what that mitigation strategy is going to be and how much it will cost. And you can ask for that. Right now, you can't. It's more, again, cap in hand. So as the village has both an OCP and a zoning bylaw in place, we are required under section 460 of the Local Government Act to have a bylaw that outlines how we will process any of these amendments. And as I mentioned earlier, we have this in place under the Development Procedures Bylaw 1090, 2016. And that can be updated. All of these bylaws can be updated at any time. So the current development procedures bylaw process is we have an application is submitted. Then the planning department reviews and prepares a report for council. Council reviews and authorizes any one or all of the following: to authorize us staff to refer to external agencies, the setting up of a tentative public notification meeting, which is what we just did the other day with the 511. Council authorized us to set up that public notification meeting. Any reports from a registered professional, if as applicable, for example, if it's like under the development permit, but not under the, well, depends how you ask. And then staff to set up a formal public hearing if applicable. Planning department sends a report back to council after all of these activities are done and says, yes, we should do it. No, we shouldn't do it. Or we can do it with conditions. Then council has the final decision-making process. They can approve it with no conditions. They can approve it with conditions, or they can just outright refuse it. And please note, anytime that a report is put in front of you as a council, you can say no more to it. No matter where we're at in this process, anytime there's a staff report in front of you or on anything dealing with land development, or then let's say I've got an application in for X number of dwellings or whatever, and I'm putting a report in front of you, you can say first, second, or third reading, we're done. No more. We're not interested in that anymore. But you can't just say we're refusing it because I don't like you, because that'll get you into trouble. You have to come at it from a land use planning perspective. Why are we refusing it? It's not because Ken Cossey says so. It's because we've looked at X, Y, and Z, and these are the concerns. We've taken it to the public hearing. These are the concerns. Those are land use planning issues. Simple yes or no. We like that subject, or we like that amendment, or no, we don't like that amendment. Doesn't help the situation much. It would be nice if the community would say, no, we don't like it because of X, Y, and Z, or yes, we like it because of X, Y, and Z. But that's just a learning curve. So development is a two-sided concept. It can create new housing and expand the tax base on one side, and creates additional requests for new programs and services on the other side. The overall benefits of development can be summarized into the categories of an increase in either the housing stock, commercial stock, an expanded property tax base, an increase of potentially new jobs in the area. The costs can include but not be limited to loss of green space, congestion, and an increased demand upon local services and infrastructure. So when the concept of facing increased development pressures, the village is now challenged with responding to new demands to provide for more services and programs for its residents, with a limited tax base to draw upon. Development cost charges are authorized under the Local Government Act to pay for some of these things, but they're not authorized do any community amenities, such as the purchase of a new fire truck, the building of a new library, or a community hall through the development cost charges process. There is some changes that are coming. The province has been talking about changing the DCCs and expanding it, but at this particular point in time, they have not. The question now becomes, how does a growing municipality such as Harrison Hot Springs finance, build and maintain the current community amenities and any future requests? In British Columbia, the ability for local governments to raise revenues to pay for these new demands is limited to the use of property taxes and grants from senior levels of government or potential contributions from developers. This is what I was talking about before with your community amenity contributions. So here it is. What is a community amenity? This fire truck is what you can afford, but this is what you need and require now. Contributions agreed to by the applicant or developer and the village as part of the rezoning process is initiated by the applicant and developer. Community amenity contributions can take many forms, including the provisions of amenities, affordable housing, and other financial contributions towards amenities. The agreed to contribution is obtained by the village through the rezoning process. You cannot take it through the development permit process. You cannot take it through the building permit process. You cannot take it through the approving officer process. The only time you can take a community amenity is through the rezoning process. A common misconception is that a local government has the legal authority to impose community contributions. As I mentioned earlier, not so. Because the Local Government Act is silent on this issue, and it can be argued that the LGA actually prohibits it, as outlined in section 462, paragraph 6, as outlined below. And a local government, the City of Vancouver, or an approving officer must not do either of the following unless authorized by this act, by another act, or by bylaw made under the authority of this act or any other act. And that includes imposing a fee, doing an extra charge or tax, requiring a work or service to be provided. This is where the community amenity contributions comes in. This is why it's very delicate that we handle it properly. So there's two types of approaches to your community amenity contributions. There's what's called the cost-based approach or a land lift approach. The cost-based approach is, for example, when I'm coming in with going to build a new apartment building, 100 new units, and it's going to be the additional cost to the fire department of, I don't know, $40,000, $50,000. So they did contribute $50,000 to purchase whatever equipment is that we need. Or there's the land lift approach. The land lift comes in, does a whole bunch of an appraisal of systems where it says, because of my new development, the value of this land has gone from $25 to $10,000. So that's a percentage increase. So as a land lift approach, municipalities say, well, we want 50% of that land lift or 60%, whatever the negotiation is. The province does not recommend at this particular point in time that you do a land lift approach. This is what Whistler was doing for the longest time, and they got slapped because they were seen doing that and seen as buying zoning rights or selling zoning rights. You can't do that. It's recommended that we just do a cost-based approach at this particular point in time until the legislation comes in, and then we can reevaluate. The modified cost-based approach is the better approach. Negotiations take place between the developer and the municipality to consider a package of amenities that will make sense given the development being proposed. And what a lot of developers will do under this is they'll try to shove what is going to happen anyhow with street furniture and everything else into that package. No. Because they're going to have to pay that cost anyhow. So they're trying to say, we're going to do it for the community and sneak it in over here when it's a standalone cost over here for the developer. So what have we got in place? Well, we have in place right now, we have policy 1.26, which addresses the community amenity contributions, and this was updated in 2017. In the new official community plan, a new policy has been inserted into the community plan to address the transparency issue that the ministry guidelines are talking about. And at that, is there any questions?
Any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Worship. No, I don't have any questions. I just want to say thank you very much for very clear and concise overrun of what we have to do in the future. I appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Facio. John.
Hello, John Butler. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Just like to thank Mr. Cossey for this refresher. I've been through it many times with him over the years, and it's a good wake-up call and a good planning tool, especially with two new councillors on board who have been here before. But again, thank you very much for a very comprehensive report.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bidell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Mr. Cossey. I think no matter how many times we go over a planning 101, I certainly learn something new every single time. So thank you for taking the time today. I do have one question that maybe you could possibly elaborate on, and I'm a little bit confused on what the exact role the municipal approving officer is. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? Thank you.
Sure. The municipal approving officer is the individual that's been appointed by council to look after and do all of the subdivision approving for any application that comes in for subdivision approving. So that they will look at it and say, you know, yes, you can do it, but you got to do X, Y, and Z, or no, it's against the public interest. We don't want you to do that, or it's swampy water or a swampy area or whatever. That's what the approving officer does, is he or she will look after the subdivision approving function of the municipality, and the courts take they require that there's a separation of this table from the approving officer. Similar to what they do with the building inspection, there's got to be a separation between this table and the building inspector, because they're deemed as technical experts and they got to do their job in isolation.
Wonder, thank you. That gives me a little bit more clarity. Thank you.
Just further to that, I believe our operations manager, am I correct, that is in that position? Yeah. Any other questions at all? Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Cossey, I too echo my fellow councillors. Thank you very much for telling us all about what we did today, and looking forward to working with you as we progress on the OCP. So thanks, Ken, and it's always been a pleasure. I guess the only one question I would have is, when you do approach and when you're negotiating, this was always kind of a gray area for me, when you're negotiating with somebody that's going to develop in the village and you can't ask him for amenities, when you throw out a number on the table and when you say hint, I guess, could you clarify that a little bit in the fine art of negotiation? So you say, we need $50,000 would be a good round number. Can you actually say this is what we need?
Yes, you can do that when you have the proper policies in place. Right now, what it is when they come in and they're doing a rezoning, I say that we have a community amenity contribution. Are you interested?
Okay,
And then at this point, 9 times out of 10, they'll say no. And that's the end of the discussion,
end of it.
because I can't be seen as pushing it on your
No.
behalf.
and that's my understanding when you say hint at it, and so I understand that they don't have to do it, but.
No, they don't. But
No,
yeah, when it gets all done up properly and it's more transparent, then it puts the onus back into the staff side of thing to address those issues. And you have to remember too, when we're negotiating, we don't say to the developer, yes, that's well done, we're going to accept that. No, 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 no. Staff does not have that authority. We take that number and we bring it back to this table. And then this table says yes or no to it. For example, one of the applications, we had a number of, 511, we started off at 20,000. We said that wasn't good enough. So we came back and it was 30,000, and that was accepted by the council at that time.
thank
So
you.
we just need to know the parameters that we can negotiate within. That's all we need to know.
Okay, thank you very much.
So I have a few questions for you. Ken, you're talking here about what Councillor Buckley, the community amenity contributions. So the last update, I mean, we went through quite a bit here real fast. And I think it was 2015. And you kind of made a comment that those are due for review. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, are we talking about the development cost charges?
We're talking about all the different community amenity contributions, the development, the DDCs, development permits, variance permits, all of the money part of it, I guess, is the big question of it all. You're saying that, I thought I heard you say there that some of them are needing to be.
Yes, all of those should be reviewed periodically and to bring them up to date.
So you're recommending that all of them be brought up to date? Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, the bylaws.
All of the bylaws. So will you be presenting that to staff to come to council with recommendations to do such, or are you waiting for direction from council to?
If that is the pleasure of council, I'm more than willing to do that, your worship. But you have to remember that this also, that type of work also ties in with the budgeting process, which is happening tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I wasn't talking about today
Oh,
or tomorrow. No,
okay,
no, 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 no,
good.
no,
That
no,
would've
no,
been a lot of
no,
work.
no, I'm just talking about to put it on the agenda for future.
Yes,
Okay. Do we need a motion to do that, or is staff just? Yes. To the deputy corporate officer, please.
Yes, we would require a motion, your worship.
So could I move? Go ahead, Councillor Facio.
Move the motion, Mr. Mayor.
You move the motion
Yes.
to update all of our bylaws?
Yes.
Second by Councillor Jackson. Call the question. All in favor? Passes unanimously.
just for clarification, your worship, friendly amendment, that's the land development bylaws.
Yes,
Thank you.
correct. Correct. So I had another, I've had a few people over the years come up to me, and I mean, I don't mean any disrespect to our planner, but just sometimes it's confusing for what the developer, what does the village want? I mean, I know that some of these things are vague. So it's the discretion of whoever they're in contact with, which makes it difficult for the developer. I mean, I know myself, I've done 2 properties here, and each time it changes, which makes it very difficult to understand what it is that the village needs or wants. So it can be frustrating, I'm sure, on staff as well as on the developer. Suggestions from yourself on how we can improve that.
Yes, your worship. One of the ways to look at doing this, my humble opinion is that in your strategic plan, you can set aside, we want to do arts and council, and in there, you'll say that these are the tasks we'd like to have accomplished by whatever year. And this is who we're going to assign to do that work. That sort of information helps with the negotiations when you're in talking with the developer and saying, we'd like to see 63 or 45 new murals or whatever the number is, and it's written in the strategic plan. It's not because right now it's just whatever the wind's blowing. But if we can tighten it all up with the strategic planning process, that would immensely help the situation. And
So-
then with the transparency program, because we got the community amenity contribution policy, it lists a few things in there. But if the developer says they're not interested, we can't talk about it anymore.
No, fair enough, but just even just the process, just the steps, so
Yeah.
it's clear, even from a simple, wanting to put a garden shed in versus building a home, versus a commercial, a complex, site, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, just so that I understand it, so that I can make a motion, so that we work towards that. What is it that you actually require?
The development of a strategic plan to deal with all of these issues that you want to look at, like whatever the program is, whatever you may want to do, when you want to have it done by, what becomes your measure of what you want to do, how you're going to assign it to, and that's just the creation of a strategic plan, which I understand. I was told you were going into doing a strategic plan. Maybe I've let the cat out of the bag, but that's where that type of information comes in use for the development of your community amenity contributions.
So question then to the deputy corporate officer. So do you need a motion then for us to incorporate that? Or will that just be part of the strategic plan?
Yes, your worship, we have direction from council to schedule something for March, and we can include that as part of the agenda.
And that will be part of the agenda. Great, great. Okay, because I know that again, and I just actually to our planner again, just walk me through kind of, if you could, just the simple process of a simple home construction in the village here. I just kind of want to work with you as kind of just go through the steps. I just want you to just kind of hear where I hear a lot of the issues come up. Are you good with that?
Sure.
Sure.
Can I go back to the chart?
Sure.
So basically what will happen is an application has been submitted. So in this case, if they're going to do an application for the house,
Yeah.
that would go to the Fraser Valley Regional District for a building permit. Then the building permit will come to the office. The operations manager, myself, and the corporate officer look at it and say, we need to do X, Y, and Z. And that could include being inside of a development permit area. Or they may require a variance because they may be saying that the height of it is only going to be 15 meters and it's only allowed to go to 5.
Okay, so I'm just going to slow you down a bit. So then once it comes, it goes to the Fraser Valley Regional District. They have it quite clearly what they want, 3 sets of drawings at such a scale, blah, 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 and it has to have these certain details in it. So that's clear. So then from there, that's the building permit process. Now, after that is approved, then it comes back to the village staff.
No, during that review
Yes.
process, that'll be referred, it is called a planning review, and then that comes to the office
So it's being done at the same time as
as the building permit,
the
yes.
building permit. So that is when staff now are going to make sure that it confines to the zoning bylaws for heights, whatever else is
Yes.
in the zoning bylaw. And staff sign off that it meets the requirements of the zoning bylaw, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so then walk me through now the next step.
Okay, the next step, if they require a development permit, or if there's various processes that could take place,
Just
if they're in
keep-
a forming character requirement or a geotechnical area, they could require a development permit. And then they have to make an application for the development permit.
So after you've done as you're doing this review, in that review, that's when you're going to tell the owner of or whoever, the applicant, that now you need a geotech report or blah, blah, blah. Is that?
Yes.
Is that?
Yep.
See, having this step by step so people can see that when they go through that process, I think would be really, really helpful. But We just talked about it. So continue on, please. Thank you.
Sure. And then once we get all of that type of information together, then the development permit is addressed at this table. And then we can say that, yes, everything's been met or not. We're still missing report, whatever. And then the council says do report, or if everything's been met, can instruct staff to issue the development permit. And then associated with it, there may be certain requirements under that development permit that they may have to meet, such as the security, or they need additional studies to be done, or whatever it is that may be required. So the development permit could be issued with conditions, depending on the circumstances, and they have to meet all of those conditions before the corporate officer can sign off on the development permit.
So those, I've seen some of them, and each one I've seen is different. So
Yes,
again, it's very hard on the developer and again, staff to know what it is.
Yep.
So just let's try and keep it. I just want to talk just even a simpler single family home here. So now we've gone through the development permit area zones, if it's required, whatever's required in that. So what is and it's come to council, council has said yes.
Yep.
Now walk me through this.
and we've issued it. But the other thing that may also be required is because the flood construction level, they may be at 13.85 when it's supposed to be at 14.5. So they may be required to bring their land up to the flood construction level or enter into a covenant
So
with
when is,
council.
so if it's a renovation or an upgrade, who actually would even know the elevation of the previous house?
When
Is that picked up?
when the building inspector, not the building inspector,
Yeah.
when I, as a citizen is gonna go out and get that information for the building inspection department.
So my next question too, Ken, and I don't want too many questions here.
Not a problem.
Just that when a piece of property comes in, they come in and they get their building permit granted to do it. So you've got it meets all the zoning, all the setbacks, everything ever to work. Now all of a sudden they come up and they build a retaining wall 3 feet up around their new property because they don't want to have a 6-foot set of stairs going into their house. They only want 3 feet. But effectively now it can potentially dam the natural water flow of the other homes next door. How do we pick that up in the process?
We rely upon the building inspector to tell us that there's something different happening out that way. And then, because when they're out there doing their inspections, because I don't know how many they do. I think there's 16 points of inspections. They could go up to 16. I don't know what the Fraser Valley Regional District does. But when they come out to do their inspections, they can let us know. And then we have to go back and look at everything again to make sure that it's still in compliance.
So when they supply the drawings from the onset, I know that I had to, and I had to put the elevations, the existing elevations in the 4 corners and what the proposed final elevations were. But nobody ever checks it. The Fraser Valley Regional District does a great job inspecting the building to make sure the building is to code, but no one checks to make sure what I've done with my elevations. And, you know, it's another component of it that I found it was missing is when the village used to, and this is a question for you too, the village used to have its own building bylaw, and that was deleted when basically the Fraser Valley Regional District took back over the services 5 or 6 years ago. But there were a number of things in there which were kind of specific to us, which are lost now. And another one of them is specifically is our sewer and water services. So there's no one that comes and does any inspection for that on a development site. So that includes, again, I have personally have done 2. One was actually the storm is actually hard plumbed into the village system. The other one is my own independent rock system. So I need to have a system that's able to handle my own property. Nobody looks at that part of it, which is a huge part because it could affect the properties adjacent to you. So we kind of like with the Fraser Valley, and again, I mean, no disrespect to anybody. I just want to get it so that it's right. So the coordination between the Fraser Valley Regional District and their focus again is on building code, not on the property part. So they're really lacking on the services. They're lacking on the elevations. And those issues are the ones that I get the phone calls and the questions of what's happened. It's so, can you comment at all on that?
Because I'm not a building inspector.
Okay.
And I understand that there is when they're building a new dwelling, that they are required to hook into the village's services, depending on how big the parcel is and where they were located at. But I understand that there is a connection fee and the utility officer does go out and inspect at the connection points.
There is no process for them to actually do that inspection.
Not the Fraser Valley Regional District, no.
No, the village. There used to be, and it used to be in our bylaw. We deleted our bylaw and we lost some really key
Okay.
parts in that bylaw.
That, you're outside of my realm?
Thank you. Yeah. So well, just one last question if I can, and maybe it'll be the operations too. So trees. So when it comes, again, we're just going to keep to a simple lot. So it comes to walk me through the part here. You said that you put in your building permit application to the Fraser Valley Regional District. At the same time, yourself and the village is looking and reviewing the zoning and all the other requirements. And I assume that's where a tree permit request would be coming in. Nothing to do with the Fraser Valley Regional District. It comes strictly right to the office as part of this parcel. Is that correct?
Yes, it does. And that's generally dealt with at the corporate officers level.
Okay, so we got the corporate officer involved in it. We have the operations manager involved in it and yourself
Myself.
involved.
And this is why we meet
there's
and we
three.
look at the
Yeah.
plan review.
And that's what we're lacking, correct? Is that plan that actually outlines who all the responsibilities and what actually they do?
I'm certain you're losing me here because in that review, the operations manager will look at it from a certain perspective and say that, yeah, we can do it, but we need to do X, Y, and Z. And that becomes a condition in the planning review. Or the needs a tree cutting permit to be issued, that becomes the corporate officers done their review, and the planner will say we need to do X, Y, and Z, and that goes back to the building department.
So the building department or to the landowner?
No, goes back to the building department that they need to do that,
Yes.
and before it can move forward, we have to do X, Y, and Z, or whatever the issue is.
Where
It's not written down as, it's just because each situation, because each site is unique. There's a certain aspects of each site are unique to the fact that it could be on here, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the same consideration or the same issues are on even beside the lot. Because with this lot could be contaminated, but when it's migrated, the contamination could be, forward into the main street, or it could be into the two adjacent lots. And different circumstances will dictate what you have to do then.
just to give you one last comment, Ken, is trees. So I'll just take I don't want to identify the properties, but you've got one property which has some old homes on it. They're not allowed to tear down the homes until they've gotten through a number of issues. Yet another developer who is actually already, the first thing that he was allowed to do was take down all of the buildings. So one says to one, well, why can he do it and I can't? So it creates, again, there's an inconsistency of what the set of rules are.
Yeah, yeah, well, I wouldn't say that. What I would suggest is that depending on the circumstances, the property A may be required to do just X and Y. Property B may be required to do A, B, C, D, E, and F because of its unique location.
Sure.
So this is what can hold up the process, and what a person will see was, well, they've done it, so I'm only going to give X, Y, and Z when they need to do A, B, C, D, and E.
We sure could use that nice detailed plan where everyone knows exactly where it's what step and that. And I know we talked about bringing this up at the strategic meeting, but I mean, I would find that it would be a very difficult conversation for most council members to even understand, to even bring the concept up, right? So I would ask you for some guidance in providing the guidance to council so that council can actually kind of understand what it is that I'm talking about. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So, council's thought on that, does that interest council at all? The process? Yes, Councillor Buckley?
Thank you. Absolutely. I too have heard the nightmares of building a house here too, that they don't know where they're waiting and things. And I guess the regional district has held them up for periods of time. But I think I know for myself, if I were to build a home, I would like to see it in black and white in front of me, what's expected of me so I could do it. So definitely I would be in favor of supporting a motion to have Ken write this up for us. So, yep.
Thank you, Councillor.
One other thing too, you have to remember is under the building code, the building inspector has a lot of wriggle room because they're deemed as a technical person. So depending on the circumstances, they may require this person to do a whole bunch of things, but over here, they require them not to do anything. Because this is what I mean, they're treated as technical advisors and the courts treat them as technical advisors, that they have to be left alone to make sure that they can safely issue that building permit. And if that requires them, even though that they've met all of the zoning requirements or whatever, if the building inspector feels that, no, it's against the public interest or against the safety issue or whatever it is, and they require additional information and that information isn't provided, that project doesn't move forward. Because that's the flexibility that they have.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. Could we not, when you were going to prepare a document like this, that's basically something that we could sort of follow and put in not an amendment, but an asterisk that this may not apply to all circumstances, but it's an overall guideline subject to change and also from the building inspector himself. But at least it would give the people some sort of guideline as to what is going to happen once you apply. And it's nothing that they could hold you to. It's just that this is what it should be, but there are special circumstances that can be.
We have at the front desk, we have, you want to do a subdivision application. I don't know if we have a building permit one anymore. We'll have to check there, but it's situated right in the front counter. It's usually pamphlets that are out there and we speak about these things in general. And the other thing too, that you might want to look at is with the step code, because the step code is a relatively new process and it helps you to combat greenhouse gases issues. And that has to be incorporated through the building code concept or through the bylaw. So you have to go and ask the Fraser Valley Regional District to change it. Maybe you can ask them to change it specifically for Harrison. That's not my decision. That's council's decision, what they may want to do. But the step code is a tool that you may want to look at.
Okay, thank you.
I like that. I like the thought, but I mean, I guess where I see is we get this breakdown is that that's a great idea, but it's bring it to council and now for council to try to make it so that it works. Where does council get involved? Where does staff get involved in it? I mean, I'll let the operations managers speak. Actually, it would be good to hear you. I think it's an important question. Thank you.
In other jurisdictions or for different municipalities that I've worked for in the past, what they did is they prepared a checklist that would, if that was done at the staff level, was done at council level. And what it does is it's kind of like a chart that says if you're making an application for a single family dwelling, it will help you through the process, what you need at the application stage, what you could expect if you do require a development permit, that kind of thing. And it's lays it out, and we could easily find that from another community.
Yes.
And make it conform to our bylaws and our processes here.
I think that would be a great something that we really need. And if I could just add to that, the other part is it would be, I think it's vital that somebody at the end of the project, before they get occupancy, that would go there and verify. I know that, again, the Fraser Valley Regional District looks at the structure, but no one looks to see if somebody brought in 50 truckloads of fill and changed it from what it was. So how do we pick that up? Maybe the person was supposed to have left 10 trees in the backyard and now every tree is gone. Like the follow-up on that there, can that be included in part of this?
Yeah, we've been discussing that and we understand that there's opportunity there. Typically, the process of development for at building permit stage is generally taken care of at the subdivision stage. For example, I mean, the newest subdivision that I'm thinking of is Willow Place, which is off of Hot Springs Road. That property clearly states that every property needs to drain to itself. So in that instance, that means that a retaining wall has to be built in the backyard of each property so it can drain onto itself, so it's not impacting the neighboring properties.
Yes.
That has to be taken into consideration at the time of building permit. So it's a bit of a process, but I mean, certainly there's always room for improvement and the ability to streamline the process, but certainly we can look at that when we're creating the checklist.
I look forward to that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. That was all my questions.
Yes, thank you very much. I forgot to mention one thing through the development procedures process. A lot of times when you're dealing with this, people will come up to council and bang the table and say, well, it's a precedent. You issued the permit across the street or you issued the permit beside my neighbors. Doesn't mean that you have to issue for the neighbor. Each individual case, or any permit that you issue is done on a case-by-case situation. Just because you give it to Ken Cossey doesn't mean you have to give it to Ken Cossey too. You understand what I'm saying? That there's no such thing as precedent, because it's a discretionary power that you have to issue that permit. So just because I come in and, it's a precedent, you gave it to Ken Cossey, I want it for Ken Cossey too. No, that's not how it works. But that's the hostility, the anger that you're going to feel, unfortunately.
Thank you. Any further? Yes, sorry, Councillor.
Just one
Facio.
question.
Yes.
Quick, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Mr. Cossey, just correct me. If a development complies to the OCP, the waiving of a public hearing can be done according to the Local Government Act?
Yes, it can be if you want to. That's a tool that's there. It's been there for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Various municipalities do use it, but with various degrees of success.
Thank you.
Councillor, any further questions? No, thank you. Thank you very much, Ken. Yes. So I move that the meeting be adjourned at, was it 3:22 to Friday, January 27th, 2023 at 10 a.m. Second by Councillor Facio. Call the question. All in favor? No, we don't do the questions. So again, I'll call the question. All in favor for adjournment? Yeah, passes unanimously. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.